I'd like to share with you a hopeful Alberta Christmas story. In 1927, a child named William Korelik was born to a poor family of Ukrainian immigrants in a shack near Whitford, Alberta, east of Edmonton. Like so many others, his family lost their farm in the depression and drought of the 1930s. This racked William's father with a sense of failure that he, in turn, inflicted on his family. Now, William was a creative and sensitive child, but this unhappy upbringing contributed to serious mental illness that he struggled with as a young man. While studying visual arts in England as a young man in the 1950s, William was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was institutionalized. He lived through years of what he called a dark night of the soul. In the words of the Hebrew prophet Isaiah, he was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. But in the midst of his despair, he discovered the real meaning of the Christmas story. And with it, he went from darkness to light and from despair to hope. He adopted as a motto the words of the African saint Augustine, "Late have I loved you, O ancient beauty, ever old and ever new." William Korelik went on to become one of the most celebrated painters in Canadian history, and his works now hang in major art galleries across the world. He created thousands of paintings about life on the prairies, about his Ukrainian roots, Canadian multiculturalism, and about his deep Christian faith. One of those is his beautiful children's book, A Northern Nativity, in which the artist reflects on growing up in the prairies in the poverty of the Great Depression, writing that times were hard that Christmas during the Depression of the 1930s. Everywhere across the country, men traveled in search of work, they baked food, slept wherever they found shelter, rode boxcars, led on always by the hope that in the next town they'd find a job and money to send to wives and children back home. In the midst of that adversity, William imagines Mary, Jesus, and Joseph seeking shelter from the cold winter in iconic Canadian scenes, from a cattle feeding stall on an Alberta ranch, to a prairie grain elevator, to an abandoned boxcar. He sees them even sleeping rough across from Parliament Hill, and as a black family receiving a meal at the Salvation Army, finally as being welcomed to a trapper's cabin by a poor Aboriginal family. William asks, if it happened here as it happened there, if it happened now as it happened then, who would have seen the miracle? Who would have brought gifts? Who would have taken them in? His images and message remind me of G.K. Chesterton's insight that Christmas is built upon a beautiful and intentional paradox, that the birth of the homeless should be celebrated in every home. Although not as severe as the Depression of the 1930s, there are too many in Alberta today who are living through a time of economic adversity and insecurity, and too many who also feel trapped by their own personal depression. But William Korelik's life, his example of emerging from darkness to light, his uplifting images, and the Christmas story that they depict, all of these things remind us that there is hope. At Christmas, it's found in a small child in a manger. And in our own time, it's found in countless small acts of kindness towards those in need. As Premier, I am forever moved by that spirit of generosity in our province. Like Prairie Gleaners, a wonderful charity started by folks in the Medicine Hat area that dehydrates, packages, and ships tons of locally grown produce, sending it to food banks across Canada and to the poor in developing parts of the world. Or like Crystal Kids, an amazing youth center that offers nutrition and school programs, mentorship, and much more to impoverished kids in inner city Edmonton. This summer, we saw families and communities open their doors of hospitality to thousands of evacuees from the northern wildfires. And of course, thousands of volunteers pitch in at food banks across the province, and their help is especially needed right now at Christmas time. These and countless other examples remind us that the spirit of Christmas, the spirit of the gift, is alive and well, even in challenging times. As we gather with family and friends over Christmas to celebrate and to remember the things that matter most, let's spare a special thought. And if we can, reach out in some way to those who may be alone or perhaps have lost loved ones this year. And let me send a special Christmas greeting to our first responders and emergency workers who are working over the holidays. but most especially to our women and men in uniform who are away from family, defending Canada's interests at military bases here and around the world. To all of them and to all of you, Merry Christmas. May the hope, joy, and light of this season lift you up now and in the year to come.